Howdy, and welcome to another episode of the Juan on Juan podcast. And I'm your host, Juan. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about Stoicism with Anderson Silver. I met Anderson on Reddit, and Reddit can be a very weird place. You can meet a lot of cool people, and then some weird individuals. It gets dark quick. But Anderson is an author. That's his pen name. He is an author. He writes books on Stoicism. He practices Stoicism. And I wasn't familiar with the philosophy until about 2 weeks ago. And I believe everybody's practiced a form of Stoicism without knowing it, because it's very simple. It's a very simple concept. It is very rational, and that's what I like about it. But we break down what Stoicism is. We go through the timeline of how it originated, what it is, what they believe, what their principles are, and what they follow. It's a practice. I wouldn't call it a religion. It's more of a practice and what you can do to better yourself, not be focused on the outside world, not be focused on what you can't control. I find this a little bit difficult to do, especially nowadays with society how it is. We're so materialistic, and the Stoics were minimalists. They believed in stripping yourself of the material aspect of things, that way you didn't become dependent on it. And we're so ruled nowadays with money, the government, our jobs, things that really they give value to them without, honestly, it's not backed up by anything. I mean, they just tell you, hey, this is how it is since you were born, and that's how it stays. And that's so unfortunate, because we talked about this on the show. Why does it have to be financial for you to be successful? You know, what defines success? I always look at things from a financial point of view, and he really broke it down. He was like, why are you thinking it from a financial point of view, from a financial standpoint? It goes deeper than that. Why can't the fulfillment to life be being a good person, telling the truth, and just being a good person all around? Anderson, very interesting individual. I love this conversation. Make sure to check out his work, his books. I'm going to be reading one of his books on our next episode. We already have one set up to really talk about the inner duality, which is going to be also a very interesting topic. But without further ado, this is Stoicism for a Better Life with Anderson Silver. And we are live. Welcome to the show, Anderson. How you doing?
All right, Juan, I'm doing awesome. How are you?
Doing all right. So I met you on Reddit, and
Right.
I've met some interesting people on Reddit. There's a lot of weird people on Reddit as well. But for the most part, my experience on Reddit has been good so far. So I met you on Reddit, and had reached out to you, or you reached out to me to do an episode, and I saw that you were into Stoicism, and I had never heard of that, and I find it very interesting, very interesting. So
Right.
before we get deeper into it, Anderson, where can people find your information? I know you've written books, you post on Reddit a lot, and you also have a podcast, so you can let the listeners know where they can find you.
Sure. Yeah, I have 2 books out, working on the third one. I write weekly articles, and my podcast, actually season 1, episode 20, the last episode went out today. All of it, links for all of it can be found on my Patreon page. That's patreon.com/Anderson Silver. All the content is free. The donations are just a suggestion. Go to the Patreon page, and you have access to the links to the books, articles, podcasts, everything.
Yes, I listened to the last episode today, actually, during the day. And so, obviously, we're going to be talking about philosophy today. And one of the questions I ask people on the show always, I feel it makes you really look into yourself. Who is Anderson Silver?
It's a good question. Anderson Silver, and actually it's fitting because it's my pen name. It's not my real name neither.
Oh, really?
So Yeah. I'll explain why I chose a pen name. But who is Anderson Silver? He's someone that I discovered over the past half a decade or so, and he is a new me. Friends I've had from 20, 30 years ago. They make a distinct separation between me of the olden times and the me of today. Anderson Silver is a philosopher. He is someone who's found true meaning in life, and so thankful that I'm on this crusade to try and share what I've learned with the world. And as I see that there's an appetite for it, I try and put more content, more free content out there. Stoicism did so much for me. Anderson Silver is trying to get some of that information out there for others so that others can benefit from it too.
That's great. And the most interesting part I found about this is that the more I look into these ancient cultures, these ancient civilizations, obviously the Greeks aren't that old, but they're still pretty far back. They
Hmm.
seem to have, their teachings and their philosophies, they seem to have like a grasp of almost what today quantum physics is. I love quantum physics, and the reason I say that is because obviously Stoicism, we're going to get into it, they believe that everything around us operates according to a web of cause and effect, resulting in a rational structure of the universe known as logos. And
Correct. Yeah.
that's that kind of ties into quantum physics because they're trying to understand the universe. They're trying to understand consciousness and the correlation between the mind and the actual reality world. And
Right.
so I find this interesting because usually when somebody, you said it changed your life and it's changed your life for the better. And usually somebody who's looking for guidance, who's looking for meaning, who's looking for purpose, they usually look towards the first thing, religion, right? Because again,
Hmm.
that's a form of guidance for them. What influenced you to get started on your path of Stoicism uh, versus, like I said, a religion? Do you still practice religious beliefs on top of that? What sort of thing is this before we actually get into what Stoicism is?
Sure. So to be 100% with you, I was never really a religious person. I didn't grow up in a religious home. I was atheist and agnostic to the core. And about 10 years ago, I reached a point in my life where I did everything I set out to do. I had the six-digit salary, I had the executive position, I had the family, kids, dogs, two cars in the driveway, you name it. And I sat back one day and I was like, huh, what now? And that's where I started my search for something more. And the reason why religion never worked for me, by definition, morality in a religious framework is based on faith. And as an agnostic, as someone who's always been able to, have empirical evidence, I couldn't just have blind faith to find my moral compass. And so I did my own education. One of the things I talk a lot about in my work is our education system has failed us big time. And so I had to go and educate myself on the spiritual side of things. And I found Stoicism that answered all of my questions. And we'll talk about this more later on, but it's a guide for, it's a philosophy for life that is purely, as you said, purely rational and logical. And so my moral compass today comes from my faith in myself, as opposed to faith in something bigger. That's why I'm, I guess, a Stoic practitioner than a religious person.
Yeah, very interesting. And the difference between, for example, and I bring up Christianity because it's one of the more, common ones.
Sure. Yeah.
Logos for the Stoics was, the universe. Logos for Christianity is, God, Jesus Christ, a personal relationship with them. Stoicism, you have a relationship with pretty much yourself, and I like it because you take things as they come. And I want to talk to you about this because we're obviously in a society where everything is materialistic. Everything is, how can I do this? How can I do that? And this kind of stops you in a way from looking at life like that. I love the fact that it's, don't stress over the things that you can't control.
Correct.
I love that. I love that because I'm one that, if for my job, very stressful, something happened that's way out of my control and I'm stressing over it. And I really like the analogy that you used in your show today about your intention was to get to work, but then
Hmm.
you ran into traffic. But in hindsight, you would have been like, oh, I should have left earlier. In hindsight, it already happened. So what are you going to do about it? You know what I mean? So
Exactly.
I find it so difficult to be able to practice something of this sort when
Oh
we're
yeah.
conditioned like that.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, look, the theory of Stoicism, and we're going to cover today. It's really simple. It's not rocket science, man. And Stoicism isn't the only philosophy that came up with this. You know, there's a big overlap between the Buddha Dharma, Buddha's teachings. There's a big overlap with a lot of religions and philosophies and spiritual frameworks, because at the core of it, it's us trying to figure out how to live a good life while we know we're dying, right? And trying to deal with the perceived unfairness around us. How do you deal with that now? Do you accept that as, well, it's part of a divine plan? Just trust, and then be good now, and you'll get your comeuppance in the next life. Or do you find another way to deal with it? And Stoicism offered an alternative. And an interesting fact, since you brought up Christianity, if I might add, there's a lot, and I mean a lot of Stoic teachings in Christianity, because at the time Christianity was becoming predominant in the Roman Empire. Stoicism was the leading philosophy. And if we go to one of the main influences in Stoicism, Marcus Aurelius, he was the Roman emperor. His son Commodus was notoriously one of the worst emperors ever. And he started the decline of the Roman Empire, 100 years of chaos. So people were looking for an answer, trying to deal with this chaos around them. Why is there these plagues? Why are we starving? Why is all this happening? And that's when Christianity found the foothold and became the answer for the people at that time. And so what happened is a lot of Stoic leaders, like Augustine of, I forget what city he's from, but he became Saint Augustine in the Christian teaching, and he wrote down in the original teachings a lot of Stoic precepts. So there's a huge overlap between those two as well.
Well, and this is probably going to trigger a lot of people, but Christianity tends to be a little bit plagiaristic in a way. They take a lot of different ideas from a lot of different religions. I've gotten to the point in my life where I believe there's a higher power, there's somebody pulling the strings. If it's Jesus, Yahweh, El, Buddha, whoever the hell he is, I don't know. I don't know.
Hmm.
And that's my thing, because again, such as this, there's so many different ideas out there that you just don't know what to be. We can't all be right. And at the same time, it's interesting that you said that we're trying to live life as we know we're preaching that, and that impending death, that we can't control that, and we don't know how we're gonna die or when, but we know it's coming, and that's
Hmm.
a bit unsettling. So,
Hmm.
without further ado, what is Stoicism?
All right. Let me give a quick crash course here on the word philosophy first for your listeners. When we say philosophy today, we immediately think of, guys wearing suede jackets with leather elbow patches, smoking a pipe, and talking about stuff in front of a blackboard, right? We immediately associate it with academics. Now, that is true, and today it's a huge field that's beyond my comprehension. I don't believe, I identify as a philosopher, but not as an academic. The original philosophies comes from pre-Christianity time. It was a guide for life, right? As human beings settled down around the Fertile Crescent, around the Mediterranean, and we started growing more stuff and having surpluses. It created opportunities for people to have jobs that were non-husbandry related, right? You didn't have to spend your lifetime growing grain if there was enough peasants for you to grow your grain for you. So it created this class of people, governors, chieftains, et cetera, teachers, full-time soldiers, and it also created philosophers. And philosophers were trying to answer the question of why are we here? What are we doing? Because the moment you no longer have to break your back from sunrise to sunset and you crawl into bed at night to just try and get your rest and repeat, rinse and repeat until the day you die, and you start having some leisure time is when you start looking up at the sky and asking these questions. Why am I alive? I didn't ask to be alive, you know? So that's what philosophy is. Originally, it was a way of life. And when Christianity came along, it kind of got kiboshed. Aristotle and Plato were popularized because their philosophy fit with the monotheistic God that the Christian religion was pushing. But every other philosophy, and back then the four major Hellenistic philosophies were Cynicism, Skepticism, Stoicism, and Epicureanism. And all of these just kind of poof, disappeared. So there's a new movement where these philosophies are coming back because we're asking the same questions again. And for a lot of people, believing in a personal God meaning some guy out there that knows my name and watches me as I'm doing stuff, that just doesn't sit well, which brings us to Stoicism. So Stoicism was one of the original four Hellenistic philosophies. Our grandfather is a guy named Socrates that I'm sure everyone's familiar with. Socrates' teachings went down through Antisthenes to Diogenes, which were the original Cynics. Diogenes is another favorite philosopher of mine. This guy was absolutely savage. I've written a few articles about him. He was just hilarious. I could do a whole show on just him. Then Diogenes teaches his disciple Crates, and then Crates teaches Zeno of Citium, which is the founder of the school of Stoicism. So Zeno was a merchant, fairly rich, and his ship gets shipwrecked. He loses all his merchandise. He's wandering through the streets, wondering what he's going to do. He finds some writing from Socrates. He turns to the bookkeeper and says, "Hey, where can I find people that think like this?" And the owner of the bookstore points out the door and says, "Right there, Crates, go talk to him." And so Zeno of Citium gets his training in the school of Cynicism, which cynics are kind of like our older cousins, if you will. We share a lot of overlap in that, there's this whole nihilism of this superfluous, pretentious human society we have.
Is that what cynical means? I don't mean to interrupt you, but cynicism,
sure, yeah.
Is that
that's where it comes from?
Okay.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Today, when we say, you're cynical, it's because you kind of look down your nose at this pretentious human construct, the civilization we've built, right? I mean, look, I have a job. I go to my company every day, and we have titles and, hierarchy and all this stuff. And it only works because we all believe in this make-believe structure. If you think about it, everything we have, from traffic rules to governments to
money,
a company, it's a concept that doesn't actually exist. It's not an empirical thing. And so the cynics, Diogenes being the most famous one, for a lack of better words, poo-pooed on all of this. I'll take 30 seconds to talk about Diogenes. He was the son of a banker. He was well off, but he started defacing the currency of the bank and the country to try and get people to realize how money, to your point, is so fake and unnecessary, right? He was saying, why do you need a cup when you can just use your hands to drink water, right? And so the cynic philosophy, the school of philosophy, what you had to do was literally you give everything away, and you take your robe and a walking stick and a little sachet, and that's it. That's how you live. So they were quote unquote homeless. Okay, Diogenes, actually the name, it comes from the Greek word for dogs, because he lived with the dogs in a giant empty wine barrel in the streets.
That's that guy.
Yeah, it's that guy. He would do the craziest things, man. Like people would yell at him from a banquet saying, "Hey, you dog, what are you doing on the streets?" So he'd be like, "Yeah, I'm a dog." All right. So he'd run in there and jump on the table and just urinate on everyone like a dog, right? He would walk around the market during the day in broad daylight with a lantern, run up into people's faces and ask them, "Are you an honest person? Are you an honest person?" And he
This
would
guy was
challenge people.
a kook, man.
Oh, he was crazy. There are stories of him with Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great was a big admirer of Diogenes, and he visited him on multiple occasions. And there's one story, there's two particular stories I love. So one of them, Alexander the Great says, "Diogenes, man, your philosophy is so great. If I wasn't Alexander the Great, I'd wish to be Diogenes." To which Diogenes replies, "Well, if I wasn't Diogenes, I'd wish to be Diogenes too." And Alexander says, "Look, is there anything I can give you from my vast empire? Name anything you want, it's yours." And Diogenes just kind of leans back and takes a deep breath and says, "Would you mind just moving left a little bit? You're blocking the sun." The guy was just, he
It's
was
almost
all,
like Kanye West. He's like, my biggest thing in life is not being able to see myself perform. It's so crazy. Somebody so bright like that and so smart to be so out there. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like that's really funny. I like that.
So I mean, he was funny. He would masturbate in public. He would defecate in public. Like his life was a protest against this quote unquote civilization we have. So that's where the word cynicism comes from. When we say we live in a cynical world, it's because we're at that generation now. We kind of look down on these social constructs, right? Decorum that we're supposed to do.
Yeah, to touch on what you said about society and that mindset, it's very crazy how we let these things rule us. And
Insane.
with nothing to back it, but then we talk about these philosophers and we talk about their practices, who in their right of mind at this day and age, because at the same time, I like to be a realistic person. And obviously the Stoics, they had that practice where I think it is once a month or something like that, they strip themselves of everything that they have or something. Again, I'm not an expert in this. I know enough, but they would strip themselves of whatever they thought was bringing them happiness so they don't become dependent on it.
Right.
How many people would be able to do that today? It's like, this is where minimalism comes in. Would you be able to live with just the clothes on your back? That's, again, society. I find it so difficult to look at life in that way because of society the way it is now. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Look, let's look at ourselves. Like you can take I don't know the stats exactly, but in the States, 80 some odd % of people identify themselves as religious. It's not true. We like to say that because we like to pretend we're part of a spiritual group, but we're not. We are the product, and when I say we, I'm talking about the last few generations. We're the product of atheism. Atheism is a religion, and the product of the atheist religion is capitalism. It's materialism, okay? And we can see this everywhere we look around us. The consumerism, the pollution, the short-sightedness, everything is a direct result of this. And so we've been conditioned, and this is what I was referring to when I said our education system failed us. We have been conditioned, not just through school. When I say education, I'm talking about board games, right? When you say board games, what do you think of? Monopoly, through TV, you turn on the TV, everything is about beating the other guy, doing better than the next person, making more money. Look at me with my fancy stuff, right? The music we listen to, the stories we hear around the table, everything has conditioned us. As much as we'd like to pretend we're fair, we all have this monster in us that's like, no, me first, bro, me first. And that's really hard to curb.
Yeah. And I live by the idea that I don't like to, if I know somebody, I take advice from somebody who is in a better position than me. That saying that says, a wolf doesn't concern himself with a sheep's opinion. I believe in that, because if you're living in the street and you're there because of your own choices, why would I take advice from you? Do you understand? Like, why would I take advice from somebody who's in a worse position than me? Obviously, yeah, they probably have the experience of what not to do, and that's probably what I won't do. But you have people who they envy others who are in a better position than them, and when I meet somebody who's more successful than me, I try and dissect their way of thinking, not in order to be better than them, but to be like them one day, to be
Right.
successful how they are. What are your ideas? That's another reason why I started the podcast, to talk to different people with different ideas and, really pick their brain, because it's very interesting. It's very
Hmm.
interesting. And we let all these things rule our lives.
Right. And Juan, I want to jump in here and challenge you on something as a Stoic here. Um, I'm a control freak. And one of the reasons we'll talk about this when we get into Stoicism. One of the reasons I love the Stoic school of thought is because it doesn't take control away from me. I still am a control freak. It's just I focused my control and energy where it should be. And so my challenge to you is when you say, why would I take advice from someone who's not better in a better place than me? You're still looking at it from a financial perspective.
Yes.
And my challenge to the people in my writings, and my books, and my articles is why can't a good moral compass be a better thing? Why can't we strive to be truly honest people? Why can't we strive to be benevolent people? Why is that not appreciated in this world and age?
Because it's a construct, Anderson. It's we don't even know what good and evil is. If
Hmm.
when I like to use the analogy one of my friends uses, when you look at the world from outer space, there are no borders. If there was no
Hmm.
animals on Earth, if there was no people on Earth, and there was only animals, would there be evil? No, it wouldn't. There would be nature. Why? Because good and evil are constructs that we came up with, and we put the damn lines on the map. We came
Hmm.
up with it. Animals don't care about the borders. It's us, that division. And I understand what you're saying about it goes deeper than just having financial security. But we're conditioned in a way where that's all we see.
Absolutely.
That's all we see. Finance, finance, finance. Why? Because we're ruled by it. It's incredible to me. And again, I fear, like somebody asked me the other day, they said, "How much do you feel that the government should take from your check?" And I said, "Nothing." Not, I mean, you're in the accounting realm, you know. I don't feel the government should take. If I use a road and I have to pay tolls on it, cool. But why should I have to pay for other people's things? You get socialism and all this stuff. But then the guy was like, "Oh, what, you want anarchy?" It's like, no, I don't want anarchy, but damn, they take so much already,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
it's crazy. But yeah, I find this very interesting, and the way of thinking.
Hmm.
So you could say Stoicism originated in Greece, then. It's a
Yes.
Greek philosophy.
Right.
Okay.
It's one of the original Greek Hellenistic philosophies. And so let me continue with the history here, if you
Hmm.
want.
Yeah.
Um, so Zeno of Citium learns about cynicism, and he says, "Yeah, I get this, guys. This is cool. I like it. But I still know how to make money. I still know how to participate in the political side of things. I still recognize that the social construct exists. I recognize that I live here. So I don't want to turn my back on this. However, I still want to do good." And so from this perspective, he builds the school of Stoicism. So he sits around in the market, and there's, imagine a giant pergola with one wall for people to hide under to get away from the sun or the rain. And in ancient Greek, this would be called a stoa. And so he would sit under the stoa in the marketplace and preach his philosophy to the people around him. And that's where the name Stoicism comes from. Right? And so the idea behind the school, if I can summarize it, is we're social animals with a capacity for reason. Okay. So the part about accepting that we're social animals is the cynic part. It's accepting that we literally are animals. Okay, we're in ape bodies. Let's not kid ourselves, right? This is a very ugly, hairless ape body. It's a vessel.
Yes.
However, and the other important part is we're pack animals, right? We're social animals. We cannot live alone. We're not Robinson Crusoe here, right?
Mhm.
And so the key here is we have a capacity for reason. Doesn't mean we use it. You don't need to look too far out the window to see that we don't use our reason all the time. But we have this capacity. And so we should accept who we are. We should accept that we're animals. We should accept where we live with its flaws. But let's use our capacity for reason, what the ancient Stoics would have called our prohairesis. to do the best that we can and work towards the betterment of the human community. And this is where Stoicism differs from cynicism, where we kind of branch off, is instead of just giving up on everything and trying to make other people realize their mistakes, we work towards making the world around us better, fully accepting we can't change everything, fully accepting we can't not feel pain, etc., etc. Just trying to make the best of what we can in the time we have using rational thought.
Yeah, and when we first spoke, I told you, when I told my fiance, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna be doing a episode on Stoicism. I'd never heard of this. She's like, yeah, that's why when somebody doesn't show feeling, they call them a Stoic. And
Yeah.
I know you spoke on this. I think it was on your podcast or something. They label it with the art of not caring. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's got society has changed it up a little bit and made it into something that it's not? Because when you think of Stoic, no emotion, don't don't react to things that are happening. But then what you're telling me, it's like, yes, you can accept it. Can a Stoic person cry and be angry, or they're not supposed to be angry? How does that work? Because we're humans, we're emotional animals, like you said. We're these big apes, and we're gonna react. We're gonna have desires. We're gonna have moments of frustration. How do you deal with that from a Stoic's point of view?
Great question. And here's one of the reasons why I love this philosophy and why it makes sense to me. One, because it never tells you what you should or shouldn't be doing, ever. Right? There's a complete and transparent recognition that everyone's different, our realities are different, our upbringings and teachings and knowledge bases is different. It's about figuring out what's best in the here and now. So it's not a rule book that you have to follow. You must do this, you must do that. So that's one thing. The other part that's very, very important to me is, and we're going to come back to this social animal with a capacity for reason often, it recognizes, as you so eloquently put it, we are human beings. We have emotions. So can a Stoic cry? Absolutely. And if a Stoic doesn't cry, I'd be worried. If a human being doesn't cry, I'd be worried. I'm like,
Yeah.
hey, you're going to stab me in my sleep tonight? Like, what's going on? Yeah. We have emotions. And there's nothing in Stoicism that says you do not feel emotions. So I practice in my writings, I use a lot of Buddha Dharma as well. By the way, as a side note for your listeners, I say Buddha Dharma and not Buddhism because Buddhism is a religion built around Buddha's teachings. Buddha Dharma is Buddha's original teachings, and that's what I stick to. And there's a big overlap between Stoicism and Buddha Dharma with respect to actually exactly what we're talking about, accepting what is, and just being able to live with it, not ignore it. So yes, a Stoic should and can feel emotions. What a Stoic does, however, is do his very best, his or hers, excuse me, very, very best to make decisions based on reason, accepting that we can't always do that because we are human after all.
Yeah, we let our emotions get the best of us sometimes, and that's why I find it so difficult to practice something of this nature, because of our human nature. And we live in a society where it's all about, we get constant streams of dopamine in our brain from the likes and from everything that's influenced, because that's what we're all about nowadays. How many followers do you have? How many likes do you get? This, that, social media. And nowadays, the only reason I'm on social media is to promote my podcast. Is a powerful marketing tool if used correctly. But we have I feel, and I said this the other day on this podcast that I was on as a guest, and I said, today we have a supercomputer with us at all times. And nobody reads anymore. Nobody does that anymore. That's why I'm into podcasting, because I still read, but podcasting is so versatile. You can just turn it on, just forget about it, and it's there in your ear while you're doing whatever. It's a lot simpler. You don't have to sit down and read a book and that's all you're doing. So I like it in that aspect. But I said, we as a society are the dumbest we've ever been, or not dumbest or uneducated, but unaware in a way, But then
Correct.
at the same time, we have all this information at our fingertips, and we can literally look up any information from anything, and then people use it to do garbage, to spread negativity, to waste time, and it just blows my mind. Every day I strive to learn something new. This is why I had never heard of this. I'll be quite honest with you. I'm like, what the heck is this stuff? And then when I looked into it, I was like, wow, this sounds really cool. It sounds very, very rational. And I like to think of things from a scientific point of view. And like you said, this doesn't tell you what to do. A religion, you can't do this. You can't do that. Oh, make sure you do this. Somebody's always watching. It's always like this control, and this takes that away, and just really makes you work on yourself. So there's also four virtues of Stoicism. Can we talk about that? Wisdom, temperance, justice, and courage. Can we break those down a little bit? And then I want to talk about Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, some of the people who are known as Stoic philosophers.
Sure. I'll talk about the core virtues. I don't want to lose too much time on that because, that's when we get into the details a little bit. There's, of course, a whole, if we talk about the actual Stoic teachings from 3,000 years ago, they also believed the universe was in a constant expansion and then retraction and then expansion and retraction coming from an original one single point of explosion, which ironically today it makes a lot of sense knowing that we come from the Big Bang and knowing that there's going to be
I told you they knew things before we even knew them.
Well, I didn't want to interrupt you, but while you were talking about this, Socrates, that everyone knows, he was such a beast in philosophy. We literally divide philosophy into two eras, right? Pre-Socratic and post-Socratic. And the pre-Socratic philosophers, we're going back 4,000 years, right? The concept of an atom, including its name, comes from pre-Socratic philosophers. Ain't that something?
Wow. Yeah.
But I digress.
We're on to something.
Yeah. For example, Plato, he wrote 27 treatises, man. I've read about a dozen of them, and it's incredible what these people knew and how applicable it still is today. But again, I digress. Let me get to the four core virtues. So as a Stoic, we try to put control where we have a return on our investment, right? We want to talk about money and materials. Let's look at it from an investment perspective. If I try to control what traffic is going to do, I'm going to waste my energy because I cannot control the 5,000 other cars that are on the road on my way to work. What I can control is my thoughts and my intentions for actions right here and right now. Okay, the past is in the past. I can't change it. The future is unknown. I don't even know if I'm going to be alive for the future. But in this present moment, right here, right now, I'm thinking. I know that to be real for a fact. The world around me, I can't be sure it's there, right? Are we in the matrix or not? We don't know. But I know for a fact that I'm thinking right here, right now. And so as a Stoic, I focus all my energy in trying to control that. And the second that moment is over, I'm done with it. It's an end to itself. Right. This is where we would differ from consequentialism, where you do everything with the end result in mind, and you try to do the best decisions for the greatest good. What does that do? In retrospect, often than not, you're going to look back and be like, damn, that was not the best decision. I should have, hindsight 2020, I should have done the other thing. But hindsight is always 2020. You can never know how something's going to turn out.
Yeah.
And so exactly. And so Stoicism, again, the reason why it makes so much sense to me as a control freak, now I know at least what I can control, so I can really do. I've like quintupled my productivity as far as
focus your energy on what needs to be done.
Right. And what the virtues does, it helps you figure out what it is that needs to be done. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so the four virtues, we start with, you mentioned courage, strength. They're interchangeable. And basically, strength is what ought to be tolerated and what ought not be tolerated, right? A lot of Stoics were famously or infamously tortured to death and killed. But even on the way out, they would say quotes like, I am not a slave to you. I'm at peace, stuff like that. So strength is the virtue of doing, being able to do the right thing when you still feel fear, let's say, or pain, right? Another one is temperance. This is what ought and ought not be wanted. Okay. For example, a lot of addicts have used cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, which comes from Stoicism. The guys who put this thing together in the 70s were Stoics, and this modern day psychological practice is still very much used. And temperance would be a big virtue that they would focus on. And then a third one is prudence, and prudence is what ought and ought not be desired. And this is where we would again control. Do we want to make money? Do we want to pursue sensory pleasures? And then the final one is the virtue of justice. What ought and ought not be shared. Right. And we use these 4 core virtues to try and guide our decision making. So in the Stoic school of thought, they would study physics, they would study logic, and they would study ethics. And so these 4 core virtues would have driven the ethical educational part of the philosophy.
Yeah, and to touch on it's almost like having the 10 Commandments, the 42 laws of a guide. Like I said earlier, people sometimes look to religion for that, the Bible, these ancient texts. But then, like I told you, I'm into ancient civilizations. If you look at all these ideologies, all the religions around the world, it's like the same exact thing. It's the same people, the same archetypes, just named differently because it's gone through a whole generations of different people and cultures and different sides of the world, and it's just the same thing, just named differently. So
correct.
You mentioned something that I was like, what the hell is he talking about? You said a lot of them were tortured and killed? Were they were they persecuted or
Kinda. I mean, so if you recall at the beginning, I was talking a little bit about what differs us from the cynics is that a Stoic does want to make the world around him better. Okay. We're not just pursuing. So the cynics just wanted to make fun of everyone and point out the fallacy of the world we live in. Okay. Another one of the philosophies of the 4 philosophies was skepticism, where they would just question everything, which is kind of annoying if you think about it. Hanging around someone, so I was like, but why? Why?
Yeah.
Another one was Epicureanism, and Epicureanism, interestingly, does have a small bit of following today. It's interesting to me because Epicureanism, it's the pursuit of happiness. They're saying the purpose to life is just being happy. And so as an Epicurean, you would live in a commune and you would just take care of yourself. And it was almost like a 70s hippie type commune deal. Just be happy and make the most out of life. Stoicism is the only one where they said, okay, fine, we get it. We're nihilistic. We're just stardust traveling through the cosmos. All is for naught, and all of this is, a fake construct. Fine, I understand. But I'm still here. I got to do something. Right. And so the Stoic school says, well, why not use this time to try and make the human community a better place? And that appeals to me. I don't want to spend my time pursuing sensory pleasures. Been there, done that, very hollow. Right. I don't want to spend my time questioning everything openly, at least. Obviously, part of education is questioning everything. But I don't want to be that guy that's just going around saying, you're wrong, you're wrong. And I also don't want to be that guy that's cynical about everything. I would rather use this time I have here because I know it's not forever. I might die tonight. I might die tomorrow. I might die 50 years from now. I have some time. I'd rather put that to good use so that on my deathbed I can look back and be like, yeah, time well spent. Good job, Anderson.
Yeah, we'll sit down and record podcasts. That's an awesome way. I wanted to what you said about being in the here and now. I wanted to read you a
uh, a quote by Alan Watts, who he says, "The future is a concept. It doesn't exist. There is no such thing as tomorrow. There never will be because time is always now. That's one of the things we discover when we stop talking to ourselves and stop thinking. We find there is only present, only an eternal now." And that's like the same thing, focusing on what the now is. And I do sensory deprivation, and sometimes it's so hard to disconnect, again, because of all these influences, the stimuli, 24 hours a day, always checking your email, always doing this, always doing that. That when I'm in the tank and it's just me and my thoughts, it's so hard to focus on the now. It's like, stop thinking about everything. Stop, cut it out, and start focusing on the now. And again, I love that idea. I entertain the idea of, if we're in a simulation, what is this? The Matrix. What are the origins of life? Pretty much, it's very insane. And these people back then, they had a lot of knowledge. In these ancient cultures, they had a lot of knowledge, and whether it was passed down from whoever, because they'll even tell you, hey, so and so passed it down to us. Well, who the hell is so and so? Oh, they came down from the heavens, and they came down and talked to us and showed us the stars and this star cluster and this and that. It's like, what the hell is that about? So do you believe everybody should practice Stoicism, and then how you believe it'll change their lives? Because I'm still a little bit on the fence, because it's like I told you, it's so hard to change your ways. And I think I heard you in one of your episodes talk about not forcing change. If you're going to diet, I think, start off by introducing I don't know if it was you, correct me if I'm wrong, about forcing change upon you, because that's another thing that's not good.
Right, correct. Lot of topics there to cover. So let me go back to the present moment first off, if I may. And remind me the questions after, because you have 3 really good questions in there. I want to get to all of them. So as far as the present moment is concerned, we spoke about the history of Stoicism a little bit. If we fast forward through a few centuries through Christianity, in the 15th and 16th century, there was this philosophical movement called the Enlightenment. Some of your listeners might be familiar with this. And the biggest first movers of this movement was a name I'm sure you've heard, René Descartes. Okay. And René Descartes, one of his, or not one of, the most famous thought experiment he did, at the end he came up with the conclusion of cogito ergo sum, which is Latin for I think, therefore I am.
Oof.
What he did, he was a skeptic, right? He was not a Stoic. A lot of Enlightenment philosophers read up on Stoicism because it's so rational, right? But René Descartes was a skeptic, and he said, let me imagine that my life, my world around me is a basket of apples. Let me empty this basket onto the ground, empty the basket, so everything is lie. Everything is a lie. Let me start to pick up these apples, these ideas one by one, and see what is actually true. And the conclusion he came to is the only thing he can be absolutely sure about is that he's thinking right here, right now. Right. Everything beyond that, it could be a little, us today, we say, hey, are we in the Matrix, man? Back then, he was saying, what if there's a little demon that's whispering in my ear or that's manipulating my eyes? Right. The world outside of me is not inside my head. I know this vision goes through my eyes and into my brain. How do I know it's not manipulated in there? How do you know that what you see out there is actually there?
The observer effect as well. That's another thing. And that's
Correct.
why I think we're in a simulation, because the observer effect is real big.
Right.
It's a real thing.
And look, as a Stoic, I'm not going to disagree with that. The beauty of Stoicism, as we discuss it more and more, is I don't disagree with afterlife, God. We're in a simulation. We're not in a simulation. None of that matters to me. I've kind of grown past that, spiritually speaking, but we'll cover that in a second. So when we talk about the being in the here and now, it's the only thing any one of us has ever been sure of, can ever be sure about, which is why, as a Stoic, I spend all my time and energy focusing right here, right now, right? We spoke about this before as well. It's just the most logical conclusion of where I exist, how I exist, and how I can operate. and that's the focus in the present moment. To your point before.
Yeah. Yeah.
As far as spirituality is concerned, I have a chapter in my book. I talk about this. I talk about in my second book. I talk about religion, theology. I talk about paganism. I talk about philosophy. I talk about atheism. I tried really hard to discuss all different views on this duality within, and then to pinpoint the middle ground in the Venn diagram of all the belief systems. And I said, look, if they all agree on these points, they must be true. So let's focus on only these points, like in a very stoic way. We didn't choose any, like, well, this sounds good. No, no, no. What can we be absolutely sure about? And as far as spirituality is concerned, do I want everyone to study Stoicism? No. Because what's the best answer? Is it religion? Is it rules? Is it consequentialism? We don't know. Everyone has a different life. Everyone has a different personality, a different reality, different trauma they might have gone through, different education. Everybody is different. And so everybody will have something different that works for them. Religion is a beautiful thing. It can be a beautiful thing. Nothing against religion. It just doesn't work for me. Right. And we can point at a bunch of examples where religion was used in an evil way.
Yes.
Don't
get me started.
But conversely, as a Stoic, I can argue and say, well, also think about how many lives it saved, right? If I understand correctly, the whole AA program is based on the 12 steps. It's based on a belief in a higher power, right? How many people that are devout believers, that are good people because they believe. So religion can be a great thing. I think Stoicism has a very big place in today's modern society because, I came through, I'm a product of the capitalist system. I'm John Locke's wet dream, right? I'm a CPA that went through the ranks and beat the competition and came out on the other end looking for answers. And I found Stoicism because it still fits with my original programming. It's just changed. It's like a code on top of the code I came pre-built with. And I think that's why Stoicism is so not, I'm going to say popular, but there's a huge movement. With the Enlightenment, Stoicism was kind of brought up from the ashes, like the phoenix, if you will. And then in the 50s, there was a huge movement in modern day psychological circles. Cognitive behavioral therapy is the most popular tool that's used today, that's entirely based on Stoicism. And so in the past 60, 70 years, there's been a huge new Stoa movement, and there's even sects in Stoicism, sects that believe in the more religious aspect, are more logos focused. I personally believe in determinism and the logos. Do I believe that we all come from a single point of fire that keeps expanding and retracting? I don't know, and it doesn't really matter to me. It doesn't affect my day to day. It doesn't affect my present moment. But not to drag on too long here, can Stoicism help a lot of people? Absolutely, because it does fit with what we already know. It makes sense with everybody. I have friends, Muslim friends, Christian friends that are devoutly religious, and they still practice, but they also practice Stoicism because it makes sense. It doesn't counteract with anything. It doesn't disagree with anything. My atheist friends, same thing. Although between you and me, I also disagree with atheism. I think it's an ignorance of the definition of the word. I think most people that call themselves atheists are actually agnostic. But anyways, Stoicism fits with any belief system that you already have, and it really does offer some answers. Are they quick solutions? Of course not. But it does offer some answers.
Yeah, and I call this podcast my personal enlightenment because I'm expanding my consciousness and meeting people like you and talking to people like you on subjects that I didn't even know about. I'm learning every single day and doing research every single day. And to touch on what you said, I actually talked to somebody about this the other day. I watched the movie Prometheus and I was like, have you seen that movie?
No, I have not.
So Prometheus, they're looking for the origins of us, right? And obviously it's got to do with aliens. I don't want to spoil it, but anyways.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, so it's, if we found out where we came from, what if we found out God wasn't real or Jesus Christ wasn't real or all these things weren't real? How would that change society? Would it matter? Would it make a difference? Would people, You know what I mean? That's like so many things. It goes deeper than that.
Hmm.
So can we talk about a real life example of when you would apply these principles? Because we've been talking about the history a little bit, about their beliefs. Can we give a real life example of when you would use Stoicism? Obviously, I know I said at the beginning of the episode the analogy you used about going to work, but can you give me, for the listeners at home to be like, well, how the hell can I apply this to my life? Can you give us like a little, a run through where you would apply Stoicism and perhaps how you get a Stoic mindset through what you're going through?
Sure, sure. And this is gonna impress you by disappointing you. What do I mean by that? We're talking about this great thing and this beautiful philosophy, but it's just so pragmatic.
So simple.
So
Hmm.
applications are stupid simple. And a lot of people, that's what they want to hear. It's like, okay, but how can I tangibly do this in my life? And so my weekly articles, my group that I run on Reddit, and my podcast, they are entirely based on small exercises that you can apply in your daily life, right? And the exercises are simple. So one of my favorites is I quote one of the ancients talking about how the universe gives but the universe takes. At any point, we can lose our loved ones because we know they're going to die. They might be taken away at any time. So enjoy our time with them while we can. Okay, that sounds great, but what does that mean? Like, what can I do exactly? Well, we all have cell phones, right? Powerful tool in our hand. We have supercomputer, as you said, in the palm of our hand. But when we sit down for dinner, do we need that computer in our hands? Can we not just put it away and have a conversation with the people around the table? And that practice, that very simple practice of taking 25, 30 minutes of not checking the phone when it buzzes and instead trying to have a conversation, trying being the key word doesn't mean that you have to talk. That would be a Stoic practice. That would be a very powerful Stoic practice right there.
Wow. So I guess I'm gonna start practicing that because I actually listened to that episode where you talked about that, and I thought about it, and I was actually gonna have lunch while I was listening to the episode, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna put my phone down. And it's true what you say, we don't live in the now. We're always so busy and caught up with what's going on around us. And it's unfortunate because like you said, we should focus on spending time with our loves. Like after this episode, I'm gonna go and hang out, with my fiance and my son. Instead of
Hmm.
editing it, I'm just gonna go and have dinner and then, hang out with them and stuff. Because it's I guess it's very important, and that's I guess it's so simple.
I'll give you a quick another example if you want.
Yeah, go ahead.
Um, so one of the things, if we go back to we're social animals with a capacity for reason, one of the things that we fully accept as Stoics is that we're human beings. We have our real selves, as we refer to our rational mind is our real selves, and that lives in this vessel that is the ape body, and this vessel has a mind of its own. Right, and this is what my second book is about: our real selves versus the animal, primitive mind, the duality within.
That's
So,
that's Carl Jung too, right? Is that like the conscious and subconscious in a way?
oh yeah, oh yeah. I mean, look, the duality within is not something I came up with. I mean, this is something we see everywhere. Growing up as kids, we've all seen this cartoon where the protagonist is there with a little angel on one shoulder and a little devil
Hmm.
on the other shoulder. That's the duality within, right? This thing has existed for, I mean, I learned this from Stoic writings from 3,500 years ago. We've known about this since the beginning of our time, our species' time. Um, but how do we apply that? How can we make use of that today, knowing that this exists? Well, I know I'm a rational person, and I'm rooting for everyone. I'm truly rooting for everyone around me today. And when I'm in traffic, I'm that guy that's always trying to, if I see someone signaling, I'm in Montreal. I don't know how traffic is where you live, but in Montreal, the
Horrible.
way the way it goes is when you put your signal on, that's the cue for the guy in the next lane to speed up and cut you off, right? uh, the turn signal, people don't use their turn signal because that's when people close the gap to not let you in.
Hmm.
So I'm that guy that's always looking for people with a signal to be like, hey, I got you, fam. Come on in, right? But every now and then, some guy will just kind of come, 2 lanes over and swerve in, and I have to tap the brakes to avoid an accident. And even today, even after, 5 years of practicing this stuff, for the split second or a few seconds, my little Tasmanian devil inside starts kicking and screaming, and you piece of, look what you did to me, but it remains internal. So it sounds silly, but it's a matter of taking a deep breath, recognizing the emotions, looking at the emotions dead in the eye, not ignore them, not suppress them, because that doesn't help anything. But it's a practice of just deep breath. I recognize I'm angry, but I recognize that that is my monkey brain that wants to fight and hit the other guy on the head with a stick. Now it's my rational mind that knows an eye for an eye will leave the world blind, and I forgive him and I understand and we move on. There's another easy example.
Yeah, and I actually we didn't touch on this. I have some quotes. I know we talked about the philosophers, Seneca. Sometimes even to live is an act of courage. And we have Epictetus. We suffer not from the events in our lives, but from our judgment about them.
Yep.
And then obviously Marcus Aurelius. Can we, to summarize, can we talk about these three philosophers? Because Marcus Aurelius is a very interesting person in history, and obviously during his reign, everybody loved him, and he was this person who was just a great ruler. And then you said his son after him was horrible, you said, and that's when Christianity came in.
Oh man, Nero, Commodus, and Titus were the three worst
Nero.
emperors ever.
Yeah.
Those three were the worst. And interesting. So Commodus was Marcus Aurelius' son, right? Imagine. Nero, he had a advisor, and guess who it was? It was Seneca, right? So horrible people exist no matter how hard you try, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But so let's talk about these three ancient guides. So they're ancient guides. They're not teachers. And there's a lot more great Stoic minds. Cicero was a great teacher. Musonius Rufus, a lot of great teachers. But these three are the most popular ones. Why? Because their work survived. Okay, we don't have, when we first spoke last weekend, you asked if we have like a Bible.
A Bible.
No, we don't.
Letters and just writing in journals and stuff.
Exactly. There's nothing, because if go back to the beginning of the show, Stoicism is a way of life. It's not a doctrine that you kind of repeat. You
don't consider it a religion. You don't consider or do you believe people practice it as a religion though?
Well, by definition, if we go by Webster's definition of a religion, it's a belief in a superhuman, that's a personal God, right?
Stoic, don't you just broke it down and turn it into a literal thing.
Exactly. So in Stoicism, the logos is not a personal God, right? As being part of the logos, we recognize that we're a nothing. Like to say we're a nothing is an overstatement.
It's logos to them is an unknowable force, and in Christianity, that's it's flesh, like you said, that higher being. For Stoics, the relationship is distant, intellectual, and based on ideas of duty and virtue, and then obviously the relationship with God is, Christianity is personal.
Exactly. Our God actually, Spinoza. Baruch Spinoza, he was a philosopher from the Enlightenment. He wrote really great treatises about this. And Albert Einstein was a big believer in Spinoza's God as well. The important thing about the logos and what it is, it's everything. Okay, it's the beauty of the cosmos. There's something that moves everything, and that's what the logos is. And our rational mind, our tremendous capacity for reason, is a very tiny, small part of the logos. Right, that's what the Stoics believe. So we have a little bit of that cosmic awesomeness in us, and we have the capacity to use it. Where were we at before the logos? Sorry, quick.
Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, and Epictetus.
Yes. Right. So if we go back to Stoicism being a way of life, no, there was no Bible, there was no book. And if we look at the three books, okay, the three main books that we learn from, the oldest one is called Letters from a Stoic. Incidentally, that's the book that got me into Stoicism. So it's called Letters from a Stoic, and quite literally, it's a collection of letters from Seneca to his buddy Lucilius. His friend Lucilius was going through a litigation, about to lose his fortune. So it's one rich guy talking to another rich guy through letter correspondences and telling him not to care about their riches. The next one we have is Epictetus's Enchiridion. Now, Epictetus didn't write this down. The Enchiridion is actually written by one of his students that was taking notes in class and then put these together and made a book out of it. Right. So Epictetus never actually wrote any of this down. It's just conversations he had with his students, which is hilarious, actually. Some of the exchanges he has, the dialogues he has, in one class, he's sitting around and he's trying to teach something. And then one of his students is, he's complaining. And Epictetus says, "What's wrong?" The student says, "Oh, my nose is running." So he looks at him. He says, "Do you have hands?" "Yeah." "So wipe it, you slave." Why are you being a slave to your nose? Epictetus was so sarcastic. It was hilarious. He's the one that said, you might have heard this quote too, another one of my favorites. He says, "If it's time to die, I will die. But if it's not time to die, I will eat my lunch, for it is lunchtime."
I love that.
Yeah, it was so sarcastic. But anyway, so again, his teachings, the great Enchiridion, it wasn't him that wrote it down. Then we fast forward to the third book, Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, and these were, again, quite literally as the name suggests, his own meditations. In Stoicism, meditation refers to journaling, checking in with your rational mind, because when you put ink to paper, you're more likely to have your rational mind talking than if you try to think. When you try to think, the animal brain, the autopilot, tends to take over more because of sheer habit. So meditation for us is writing down your thoughts, writing down the good dogma, writing down the right things, the things you want to be doing, and then writing down what you did that was wrong. I reacted emotionally with a knee-jerk reaction. This was wrong. Next time I'll try to react this way. And that's what the meditations are. It's Marcus Aurelius telling himself what to do. And then after his passing, this was also put into book form. So all our guides is, rich guys talking to themselves, students taking notes, and a guy talking to himself.
So, and the thing you mentioned with Marcus Aurelius, they focused on, and correct me if I'm wrong, on mental health, right? Because what you're saying, exercising that thing, that, the making sure everything is in check, mental health, making sure that you're okay, writing down these thoughts, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And this goes right back to accepting that we are animals, right? Social animals with a capacity for reason. We are flawed. The starting point, the very beginning of the school, if you were to go through, and I've seen they have actual schools for this. You can get like diplomas, whatever, but I don't think that's of any interest. But if you were to go to an actual study guide, the starting point is the acceptance that the entirety of humanity, including ourselves, is in a decrepit state. However, it is against our own will, right? And this goes back to the animal side of us. We are not good people, man. I mean, just look around at the world. Look at what we're doing. We're killing each other. For God's sake, we're killing each other. We're polluting the world. We're so short-sighted. We're in a decrepit state. But we don't want to be. We do have this capacity to be rational and live like Vulcans without ever having emotions. We have that capacity. And so it's trying to find how to live more towards that good side, if you will, and better deal with, not control or suppress, but better deal with the decrepit side.
Yes, I agree. And we will plan to do another episode on that subject, because remember we went back and forth with ideas. And I was interested in Stoicism as well. And then you wanted to talk about the whole, the inner animal, which is also very interesting. So to wrap up, I want to ask you one last question coming from a Stoic that I just thought about it today. I said, if life gives you lemons, what do you do?
You certainly don't throw it at someone. That's what I would have said 10 years ago. You make lemonade. I mean, it goes exactly like the saying goes. You make lemonade. If I have lemons in my hand right now, and that's not what I wanted, hey, that's what I have. Let's make something with it.
Exactly. Good answer. Anderson, I really enjoyed this conversation. It was very refreshing. I love learning about new things. Did you want to add anything else before we wrap this thing up? Any final thoughts? Obviously, I'll let you put in your information one more time. I'll be checking out your books, and you're gonna have to send me some of the things I should check out about Stoicism as well, so I can add it to my book collection.
Sure, sure. Um, the one thing I want to finish up with, I'm going to quote our proverbial grandfather, Socrates here. He had a dictum that I try to live by, and this goes back to before I even became a Stoic, is the one thing I know for sure is that I know nothing. Uh, to the listeners out there, keep learning, never stop learning. Um, there's no such thing as bad information. If anything, something will reconfirm something you already knew about. Just keep learning. Self-education is the key to happiness. Whatever path you find there, it's going to come through education. So, keep listening, keep reading. On my end, my philosophy is very much based on Stoicism, Buddha Dharma, anthropology, and the sciences. Again, I've written the two books, Your User's Manual and Your Duality Within. That's volume 2. Volume 3 I'm currently working on, which is going to be called Your Dichotomy of Control. I have all my content is free, the articles, the podcasts on my Patreon page. I'll send the link, Juan, so you can put that up on your page. And I love interacting with people. All my listeners and readers, they reach out to me on Twitter and Reddit. It's so much fun. So I'd love to, if anybody has questions, reach out. I'd love to talk more about this stuff.
Yeah, I actually copied and pasted the email you sent me with all the links. So your Patreon, Twitter, everything is going to be in the description of this episode. And I want to thank you, Anderson, for coming on and being able to speak with me about this and opening up my mind to other possibilities, because there's more out there to life than what some people want to stick to. And my thing is, do you really know everything if you only know one part of it? Do you understand?
Mm-hmm.
If
Mm-hmm.
you focus and you put yourself in this one little box, your possibilities will only stay within that box. And again, I believe it's Aristotle said, the mark of an educated man is, to entertain ideas while not accepting them. That's paraphrasing it, but
Mm-hmm.
he
Mm-hmm.
said that, and I live by that, because everybody's, I love the Gnostics, and I've studied the Gnostics and their beliefs. This, like you said, we have a little bit of divinity within us because we're in this cosmos, and I love that idea. But then obviously the Gnostics were an early Christian sect that were prosecuted and killed and wiped out. Why? Because of their beliefs and what they were taking the power away from a power structure. How you said earlier, this hierarchy that doesn't matter, but yet we give it so much credibility and so much power and rule over our lives. And then you have Stoicism, where none of that matters. If so and so has this, what do you have? Focus on you. Make the world a better place. If you can't change that person, if you can't control that person, whatever, just let them be.
Mm-hmm.
And that's awesome. That's awesome. So, we'll plan to do another one, Anderson. I really enjoyed this conversation. And again, thank you for coming on. I should have read your book before having you on, so I'll be buying that. And then you can send me some more information about the Stoic philosophers and their work.
Sounds good. Sounds very good. And thank you for having me on. This was a lot of fun.
It was, I agree. Thank you, Anderson.
All right. You have a good one, Juan.
And there you have it. Make sure to check out Anderson's work. I will be posting links to that in the episode description. I really enjoyed this conversation. There are so many different ideas, ideologies, so many different things in this world that you can learn about, and how he said at the end, keep always learning. Knowledge is power, and I love that. Make sure to check out his work. Make sure to follow us on social media at the Juan on Juan podcast. Shoot me an email if you want to be on the show, if you have anything interesting to talk about. If you want me to have anyone in regards to a certain topic, I can find somebody. the Juan on Juan podcast at gmail.com. And again, thank you for the support as always. Make sure to check out our episode next week. And until next time.